The night was cold and silent. Only the wind moved across the empty land. Daniel walked home from his late shift, his boots heavy with dust. He was a simple worker, a man forgotten by most, carrying his tools on his back. His town was small. His life was quiet, but tonight the quiet felt strange. Far away, Daniel saw a faint red glow. At first he thought it was a campfire, but as he walked closer, the smell of smoke filled the air. It was not wood burning. It was metal. Scorched and twisted, he stopped on the hill looking down at the wreck. It was a ship, broken and burned, half buried in the earth. The ground was black around it, scorched from fire. Pieces of metal and shattered glass lay across the soil. He could hear the hiss of cooling pipes, the crack of metal as it cooled in the night. He had never seen a ship this close before. Only soldiers and traders had them. Ordinary workers like him stayed far away. Daniel hesitated. He knew better than to walk close. Raiders sometimes used wrecks as traps, but then he heard something. It was soft, weak, and broken. At first he thought it was the wind, but no, it was crying. The sound was faint, but it cut through the night like a knife. His heart raced. He followed the sound, each step careful. The wreck was open like a torn cage, fire still smoldering inside. He stepped over a beam, his hands black with soot. The crying grew louder. It was not a machine, not an animal. It was a baby. Inside the broken ship, in a corner covered with ash, he saw them. A woman with strange silver skin and glowing marks on her arms held a small child to her chest. Her clothes were burned, her face cut with ash. The baby cried weakly, too weak for a child that young. The woman looked up at him, her eyes wide with fear. She pulled the child closer and whispered words he did not understand. Her voice shook. She thought he was there to kill her. Her body trembled as she pressed against the wall. She was an alien, not human. Daniel knew her kind. They lived far beyond the stars, and most humans did not welcome them here. For a moment, Daniel stood frozen. He should leave. He should walk away. If raiders found him near a wreck with aliens inside, they would kill him. No one in his town would protect him. But the baby's cry cut into him again, sharp and helpless. He could not turn his back. Slowly, he raised his hands. "I won't hurt you," he whispered. His voice was soft, careful. The woman did not move. She only held the baby tighter. Daniel took off his jacket and placed it on the ground between them. He stepped back, showing he had no weapon. The smoke burned his lungs, but he stayed. The baby's cries grew weaker. The woman's eyes filled with tears. She tried to rock the child, but her hands shook too much. She whispered, "Please." Though her accent was strange, Daniel's heart twisted. He could not leave them here, not in the cold night, not with the wreck still burning. He took a step closer. She flinched, but he did not stop. He knelt, lifting his jacket slowly. He wrapped it around the child. The baby was small, light as feathers, trembling with cold. The woman's eyes widened. She waited for him to harm the child, but instead he held the baby carefully close to his chest, warming it with his own breath. "I'm here to help," Daniel said. His voice was steady. The woman's lips trembled. She did not understand all his words, but she understood his tone. Her shoulders dropped, her tears fell silently. She let him wrap the baby fully. The night grew colder. The fire in the wreck began to fade. Only smoke remained. Daniel looked around. He knew raiders would return soon. They always came back to search wrecks. If they found her and the baby, it would be the end. He looked at her. Her body was weak. She could barely stand. Still, she clutched his arm as if asking for mercy. Daniel made his choice. He would not leave them. He would not let them die in the ashes. "Come," he said firmly. He helped her to her feet. She was light, weaker than he expected. Her steps staggered, but she leaned on him. Together, they walked out of the broken ship. The stars above were sharp and cold. The wasteland stretched endless, but Daniel did not look back. He held the baby close, guided the woman through the smoke. His heart beat heavy. He knew his life had just changed. He was no longer walking home alone. He had found something in The ashes. Something no one else would believe. And as the baby's crying faded into soft breathing, Daniel whispered again, "You're safe now." The path back to Daniel's home was long, the night darker than before. He kept his arm around the alien widow, her steps weak and slow. The baby was wrapped in his jacket, small breaths trembling. Against his chest, Daniel did not speak, he only listened. His ears stayed sharp for sounds of raiders or hunters. Every shadow felt dangerous. Every gust of wind carried fear. He did not take her to the town. That would be too dangerous. Humans there would not welcome her. They would ask questions. They might call soldiers or worse. Instead, Daniel led her to an old shed on the edge of the fields, a place he once used to store tools and spare parts. It was broken with holes in the roof, but it was hidden behind trees. When they stepped inside, the woman almost collapsed. Daniel helped her sit on the floor. She leaned against the wooden wall, clutching her child tightly. Her silver skin glowed faintly in the moonlight that slipped through the cracks. Her eyes never left him, still full of fear. Daniel crouched beside her. He whispered gently, "You're safe here." The words were simple, but she did not answer. She only rocked her child, trying to calm its soft whimpers. Daniel noticed how thin she was, her hands trembling not only from fear but also from hunger. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small loaf of bread. It was all he had left for himself. He broke it in half and placed the bigger piece in front of her. The woman looked at it, her lips trembling. She hesitated, not knowing if it was a trick. Finally, when the baby reached out with tiny fingers, she took the bread and fed a small piece to her child first. The baby's name, Daniel learned, was Kiri. He heard the woman whisper it again and again, almost like a prayer. She called herself Soraya. Her voice was soft and broken. Daniel understood only some of her words, but he caught enough to piece together the story. Her ship had been attacked. Raiders had chased her through the skies. They destroyed everything. Her home, her family, her people. She was the only one left with her child. The wreck Daniel found was all that remained of her escape. Her eyes filled with tears as she told him. She looked at him with shame, afraid he would turn her away, but Daniel only listened quietly. His heart was heavy. He had known hardship, but nothing like this. Outside, the wind howled, and the shed creaked. Daniel set an old blanket on the floor and motioned for her to lie down. She shook her head at first, still guarding her baby, but exhaustion won. Her body gave in, and slowly she lowered herself. Holding Kiri close, Daniel stayed near the door, keeping watch. He had no weapons, only a heavy wrench from his bag, but he would fight if anyone came. He stared into the night through the cracks, every rustle in the grass making his muscles tense. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the sound of Kiri's soft breathing. Daniel's mind raced. He knew hiding them was dangerous. If anyone in the town discovered, he would be branded a traitor. If the raiders returned, they would kill him first. Still, he could not push them away. The memory of the burned ship haunted him, the image of Soraya's broken body, the baby's desperate cry. Near dawn, Soraya stirred. Her eyes met his. She whispered something in her language, then tried again in broken human tongue. "Why? You help?" Daniel did not answer right away. He looked at the baby still sleeping in her arms. He thought of his own life, empty and cold, with no one waiting for him. Finally, he said softly, "Because no one helped me once." Her eyes widened. She did not fully understand his words, but she felt the weight in his voice. Slowly, she lowered her head in respect. That day, Daniel worked as usual, pretending nothing had changed. He left the shed at sunrise, walked into town, and joined the other workers. His hands moved heavy crates, his back bent under labor, but his mind never left the shed. He worried about Soraya and Kiri, alone and hungry. When evening came, he returned quietly with food hidden under his coat. He carried a bottle of water, a bit of fruit, and some bread. Soraya's eyes lit up when he placed the food down. She whispered thanks, her voice trembling. She tore the fruit into small pieces and fed Kiri first, eating only when the child was satisfied. Daniel watched them. Something inside him softened. The shed, once empty and silent, now felt alive. A faint sound of breathing, of whispers, of tiny laughter when Kiri touched his finger. Still, fear never left them. At night, Soraya woke often, clutching her child whenever a dog barked or a cart rolled past on the distant road. Daniel whispered again and again, "Safe. You are safe." But even he did not know if it was true. In the days that followed, Soraya began to trust him little by little. She spoke more words, teaching Daniel her name, teaching Kiri to smile at him, but always in silence, always hidden. Their lives became a secret bound by fear. And though Daniel never said it out loud, he knew the truth. He could not turn back anymore. Soraya and Kiri were no longer strangers. They were his responsibility now. His heart had made its choice the night he stepped into the burned ship, and with each passing day in the silent refuge, that choice pulled him deeper into danger. The days passed slowly and the nights grew heavier. Daniel's shed, once a forgotten place, now held life within it. Soraya and her child, Kiri, stayed hidden during the day, while Daniel worked in town. He returned late each evening carrying food in secret, his steps careful so no one would notice the weight under his coat. But food was never enough. Daniel earned little from his labor, and what he bought for himself now had to be shared. Bread disappeared quickly, fruit was gone, in a night, and the water he carried seemed too little for three. Daniel often went to bed hungry, lying on the cold wooden floor while Soraya and Kiri huddled together under the blanket. One night, as Daniel chewed on a dry crust of bread, Soraya pushed her portion back toward him. Her eyes were firm though her hands shook. "You eat?" she whispered. Her voice carried both command and kindness. Daniel shook his head, sliding the bread back to her. "You need it more," he said. He looked at the baby in her arms, tiny and weak. "For him, not me." Soraya's lips trembled. "For the first time since the wreck." She smiled faintly. It was small, fragile, but it was real. Daniel felt something shift inside him, a warmth he had not known for years. Yet hunger pressed hard, making every breath heavy. The neighbors began to notice changes. In him in town, workers whispered, "Daniel looks thinner, he hides something. Why does he buy food but eat nothing here?" Their eyes followed him, suspicion growing like weeds. Daniel pretended not to hear, but inside he feared. If they discovered Soraya and Kiri, everything would end. That night, when Daniel returned, Soraya sat near the door. She looked restless, her eyes darting to the cracks in the wood. "We leave," she whispered in broken words. She stood, clutching Kiri tightly. "Danger too much." Daniel blocked the door with his arm, his heart pounded. "No," he said firmly, "it's not safe out there." Soraya's eyes filled with tears. "I make trouble," she said. "You risk life." She tried to push past him, but Daniel held her arm gently, not letting her go. "You're not trouble," he said. His voice was steady, though his chest ached with fear. "You and Kiri, you're family now." The word felt strange on his tongue, but true. He meant it. His eyes did not move away from hers. Soraya froze. The words seemed to strike deep into her heart. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Slowly, her grip on the door loosened. She lowered her head and held Kiri close, silent tears running down her face. That night, hunger still pressed on them. The baby whimpered softly, its cries thin like broken glass. Soraya tried to quiet him with gentle songs in her language. Daniel sat close, watching them. His stomach hurt from emptiness, but his heart ached more for the child. He reached into his bag and found a small piece of dried meat he had hidden. He broke it into tiny strips, offering one to Soraya. She shook her head, giving it to Kiri instead. The baby sucked on it weakly, the sound filling the shed like music. For a moment, Daniel felt peace even as his stomach growled. The night outside was restless, dogs barked in the distance and men's voices carried faintly across the fields. Daniel stood quickly, peering through the cracks. His body tensed. For a moment he thought raiders had come. His hand tightened. around the wrench he kept by the door, but the voices faded away, only drunk workers returning home. Still, the fear stayed. Soraya's hands shook as she held Kiri. Daniel sat back down, whispering, "It's all right," though his heart did not believe it. Hours passed and the shed grew colder. The hunger made it worse. Every sound seemed sharper, every shadow deeper. Daniel watched the stars through a hole in the roof. His mind heavy with thoughts, he wondered how long they could survive like this. How long before someone discovered them? How long before the raiders returned? Kiri stirred in Soraya's arms, making a soft sound. Daniel leaned closer. The baby reached out with a tiny hand, brushing Daniel's finger. A small laugh escaped, the child light and pure. Soraya looked at Daniel, surprise in her eyes. It was the first time she had seen her child smile since the wreck. Daniel felt tears burn in his own eyes. He let the child's fingers wrap around his, fragile but strong in their own way. In that moment, the hunger, the fear, the cold, all faded. He knew why he had chosen to help, why he would keep fighting no matter the cost. Still, the night was long, and danger was never far. Daniel sat, awake, keeping watch while Soraya and Kiri finally slept. The shed was silent but full, no longer empty like before. Yet he knew the silence would not last. Hunger was not their only enemy. Suspicion grew in the town and shadows moved in the dark. And as Daniel listened to the wind, he understood something deep in his bones. The real struggle had only begun. The days turned into weeks. Daniel tried to live two lives at once. In the daylight, he was the quiet worker everyone ignored. In the night, he was the protector of a widow and her child. He brought food in secret, patched holes in the shed, and stayed awake when the baby cried. But no secret stays hidden forever. Whispers in town grew sharper. Some men said they saw Daniel walking toward the woods at night. Others said he looked too thin for the food he bought. Suspicion was rising, and Daniel felt its weight every time he walked through the market. One evening, when the sun bled red across the sky, Daniel noticed strange tracks in the dirt near the burned ship. Heavy boots, more than one pair. He crouched low, touching the prints. His heart sank. Raiders had returned. They were searching, and he knew what they wanted. Survivors. That night he did not sleep. He sat at the shed door, his wrench in hand, his ears strained for every sound. Soraya felt his fear, though he tried to hide it. She asked in broken words, "They come back?" Daniel nodded once, his jaw tight. "Yes." The baby whimpered as if sensing the danger. Soraya hushed Kiri quickly, rocking him in her arms. The shed grew colder, though no wind passed through. The next night, danger arrived. The crunch of boots echoed outside. Daniel froze. Soraya's eyes went wide. She clutched Kiri close. Daniel motioned with his hand. Quiet, not a sound. He pulled up a loose wooden plank in the floor. Beneath it was a shallow space he had dug days before, just in case. He guided Soraya and Kiri into the hiding place. She resisted for a moment, not wanting to leave him, but Daniel's eyes burned with command. "Hide," he whispered. "Now." She lowered herself into the dark space, holding Kiri tight. Daniel replaced the plank, leaving only a thin crack for air. He sat back just as fists pounded against the shed door. "Open," a rough voice shouted. Daniel's heart thundered. He gripped the wrench in his hand. His voice came calm, though his blood raced. "What do you want?" The door burst open. 3 raiders stepped inside, their faces rough, scarred, eyes sharp, like knives. They looked around, sniffing the air like wolves. One stepped closer, pointing at Daniel. "We tracked survivors. Ship was burned, but not everyone died." "Where are they?" Daniel forced a tired laugh. "Survivors? You think anyone lived through that fire? You're wasting time." The raider's eyes narrowed. He stepped close until Daniel could smell the stench of smoke on his clothes. "You live near here, don't you? You'd know if someone crawled away." Daniel's hand tightened on the wrench, but he did not move. "I saw the wreck," he said calmly. "Nothing but ash and bones." The raider studied him, suspicion in his gaze. Behind him, another kicked over a box, scattering old tools. The third raider stepped toward the back wall, listening. Daniel's chest tightened. He prayed Soraya would not move, that Kiri would not cry. The raider near the wall turned suddenly. "What's this shed for? You hiding something?" He moved toward the floor, boots scraping the plank. Daniel's heart nearly stopped. He stepped forward quickly, slamming the wrench down on a barrel. The loud clang echoed. "Only junk here," he growled. "But if you want my tools, take them. They're worth more than corpses." The noise startled the raider. He glanced back, distracted for only a moment. The leader grunted. "Nothing here but dirt and a fool." He spat on the floor. "If you're lying, we'll know." With that, the three turned and left, boots crunching into the night. Daniel stood frozen, sweat pouring down his back. Only when the sound of their boots faded did he drop the wrench from his trembling hand. He knelt quickly, pulling up the plank. Soraya gasped for air, her face pale. Kiri whimpered softly against her chest. She looked at him, her eyes full of both fear and gratitude. "They come again," she whispered. Her voice shook. Daniel nodded. "Yes," he said. "And next time, they won't just search. They'll burn everything until they find you." Silence filled the shed. Soraya held Kiri tightly, rocking him back and forth. Daniel sat beside her, his hands covering his face. He knew the truth. The shed would not keep them safe much longer. The raiders would return, stronger, angrier, hungrier. And when they did, hiding would not be enough. That night stretched, endless. Daniel could not close his eyes. He stared into the dark, mind racing. He thought of escape, of building something, of finding somewhere beyond the reach of men and raiders. He looked at Soraya, her head bowed, whispering songs to her child. He thought of the word he had spoken before, family. If they were family, then he would fight for them. He would risk everything, because the raiders had returned, and next time, he would be ready. The night after the raiders came, Daniel could not sit still. His body was tired, but his mind refused to rest. He kept pacing inside the shed, his boots scraping the floor. Soraya watched him with worried eyes, holding Kiri close. The child slept, but even in sleep his small hands trembled. Daniel finally stopped, his eyes sharp with decision. "We cannot stay here," he whispered. His voice was low, but filled with iron. "They will come back, and next time, they will not leave. Until they find you." Soraya's face tightened. She knew he was right. Her voice was soft, almost breaking. "But where?" she asked in her broken human words. Daniel looked toward the hills beyond the fields, places where few dared to go. "Far," he said. "We hide where they cannot track us." The shed was no longer a refuge. It was a trap. Daniel knew it. If they remained, the raiders would sniff them out. Suspicion in town was already growing. It was only a matter of time before someone followed him, so Daniel began to build, from scraps in his yard, from broken tools and old parts. He pieced together a cart, not a normal cart, but one with hidden wheels that could glide on the dirt. He found an old engine from a farming machine and worked by lantern light to bring it back to life. His hands were rough, his back ached, but he did not stop. Soraya watched him, her eyes wide. She helped where she could, sewing cloth to cover the cart, making it look like a pile of junk from afar. At night, when Daniel's hands shook from exhaustion, she whispered strange alien words over him, soft and soothing. Though he did not understand, days turned into nights, and slowly the cart took shape. It was small, barely large enough to carry Soraya and Kiri, but strong. Daniel tested it again and again, pushing it across the field. Each creak of the wheels made him nervous. He fixed every weakness until it moved quietly. When the night of departure came, the moon was hidden behind clouds. The world felt darker than usual. Daniel loaded the cart with food, water, and blankets. Soraya sat inside with Kiri wrapped tightly. Her silver skin glowed faintly under the lantern. Daniel covered them with cloth and tools so no one would notice at first glance. "Hold tight," he whispered. His hand rested on the side of the cart. Soraya's eyes met his, full of fear but also trust. Kiri stirred, making a small sound. Daniel placed a finger over his lips. "Quiet now, little one." They set off into the night. The cart moved slowly at first, but Daniel pushed with steady strength. The path led them through empty fields, past broken fences, into wild grass that grew taller than a man. Every sound made him tense: an owl's cry, the rustle of leaves, the crunch of his own boots. Hours passed and the town lights faded behind them. Ahead stretched the dark hills covered in trees and mist. Soraya peeked out from under the cloth, her eyes wide with wonder and fear. She had never seen this land before. Her world was fire and ruin, but here the stars shone bright. Kiri whimpered, softly, hungry again. Daniel stopped under a tree. He handed Soraya a piece of bread and a small bottle of water. She fed the baby first, as always. Daniel leaned against the cart, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. He had never traveled this far before, but turning back was not an option. They moved again, deeper into the hills. The air grew colder. Branches scratched at Daniel's arms. The wheels of the cart groaned against rocks. He prayed the noise would not draw attention. At dawn, they reached an old ruin, stone walls broken and covered with moss. Daniel pushed the cart inside, hiding it beneath the fallen roof. "We rest here," he whispered. Soraya lowered herself onto the stone floor. Kiri slept against her chest. Daniel stood at the entrance, watching the horizon. For a brief moment, there was peace. The forest was silent except for birdsong. But Daniel's mind never rested. He knew the raiders would search. They would find the tracks left behind. They would follow. That evening, as the sun set, Soraya touched his arm. Her voice was soft but strong. "Why, you do this?" Daniel looked at her, surprised. He thought of the nights alone in his small home, the empty chair at his table, the silence that always greeted him. He looked at Kiri, the small hand clutching Soraya's dress, the faint smile. Even in sleep, he swallowed hard. "Because no one else would," he said, his voice cracked. "Because you deserve to live." Soraya's eyes filled with tears, but they did not fall. She reached out, her fingers brushing his hand. "Family," she whispered. The word was broken but true. Daniel nodded slowly. His chest ached with something he had not felt in years. Hope. But as night fell again, the sound of distant engines rumbled through the hills. Daniel's heart froze. He knew what it meant. The raiders had found their trail. The escape was only beginning. The rumble of engines grew louder in the hills. Daniel froze, his hands gripping the side of the ruined wall. Soraya clutched Kiri tightly, her breath sharp and fast. The child stirred, letting out a small cry. Daniel motioned quickly for silence. His finger pressed to his lips. The sound rolled through the forest like thunder, metal against stone, wheels crushing branches. The raiders were coming. They had followed the tracks. Daniel's heart raced. He had hoped for more time, but time was gone. He looked at the cart, hidden under broken stone and cloth. It would not move fast enough now. They would be caught before reaching the deeper woods. He turned to Soraya. Her eyes pleaded with him. "What do we do?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel felt the weight of choice press heavy on his shoulders. He could run alone, vanish into the trees, survive. Or he could stay, stand, and fight for Soraya and Kiri. The thought of leaving them cut him. Like a blade, he looked at the small child in her arms, the fragile life depending on him. "There's no running," Daniel said. His voice was firm. "We fight." Soraya's eyes widened. She had not expected those words. "Fight?" she whispered. She shook her head. "You die?" Daniel gave a tired smile. "Maybe," he said, "but better me than both of you." The engines stopped. Silence fell heavy outside the ruins. Then came the crunch of boots on leaves, voices low and rough. The raiders spread out, searching. Daniel gripped his wrench tight. His palms were slick with sweat, but his eyes burned with resolve. He had prepared in secret. Around the ruins, he had set small traps from scrap. Wires, sharp nails, broken bottles hidden in grass. Crude, but dangerous. He prayed they would work. The first raider entered the ruin. His rifle gleamed under the moonlight. Daniel waited in the shadow, his breath held tight in his chest. When the man's boot caught a wire, a heavy stone swung from above, smashing into his side. The raider fell with a roar of pain. Shouts erupted outside. "He's here! The survivors! Here!" Boots stormed forward. Soraya gasped, holding Kiri close. Daniel shouted, "Stay down!" As he rushed forward, swinging his wrench with all his strength, it cracked against another raider's arm. The man howled, dropping his weapon. Daniel kicked it aside, fighting like a cornered wolf. But there were too many. 2 more poured inside. Daniel swung again, the wrench cutting through the air, but a raider slammed into him, knocking him to the ground. The man raised a knife, ready to strike. Soraya screamed. In that moment, something changed. Soraya's fear turned into fire. She grabbed the fallen weapon from the ground, her hands shaking but steady enough. She fired. The blast echoed like thunder. The raider dropped instantly. Daniel rolled away, gasping. He looked up at Soraya, her arms trembling, her eyes wide with shock. She had saved him. The child whimpered in her other arm, but Soraya held strong. Her tears burned down her cheeks, but she did not let go. The fight raged. Daniel rose again, blood running from a cut on his face. He slammed his wrench into another raider. The sound of bone cracking filled the ruin. His body ached, his strength fading, but he refused to stop. Every strike, every breath was for Soraya and Kiri. Finally, silence fell. The raiders lay broken across the ruins, groaning or still. The night smelled of smoke and blood. Daniel collapsed to his knees, his chest heaving, his body screamed with pain. He looked at Soraya, still holding the weapon, her face pale and wet with tears. Then he saw her expression change. Her eyes filled with horror. She dropped the weapon and ran to him. He looked down and saw blood soaking his side, a deep wound where a blade had cut him. His hands trembled as he pressed against it. Soraya fell beside him, her hands glowing faintly as she pressed them over the wound. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking. You can't leave." Her alien words mixed with human ones, desperate and pleading. Tears dropped onto his chest. "Please stay, please." Daniel's breath grew shallow, his vision blurred. But when he looked at Soraya's face, when he heard Kiri's soft cry, he found strength. He lifted a hand weakly, brushing Soraya's cheek. "Family," he whispered, his lips barely forming the word. She shook her head furiously. "No die. Not now." She pulled something from her bag, a vial of alien liquid glowing faintly blue. She poured it into his wound. The pain burned like fire. Daniel cried out, but Soraya held him tight, whispering prayers in her tongue. Her voice was broken, but fierce. Minutes passed like hours. Daniel drifted between dark and light, his mind fading, but slowly the burning eased, his breath steadied, his eyes opened again. Soraya's face was still above him, her tears wetting his skin. She gasped with relief, hugging him fiercely. Kiri's small hand touched his arm. Daniel lay back, exhausted but alive. His body still hurt, but his heart felt stronger than ever. He had made his choice. He had fought, not for survival alone, but for something greater. For Soraya, for Kiri, for the family they had become. Outside, the night was quiet once more, but Daniel knew peace would not last. The raiders would not forgive. More would come. Yet as Soraya held his hand, her eyes fierce despite the tears, Daniel felt ready. Together they had faced death. Together, they would face whatever came next. Morning came slow over the hills. The forest smelled of smoke and blood. Daniel lay against the stone wall, his body weak but alive. Soraya sat beside him, her silver skin glowing faintly in the pale light. She held Kiri close, while her other hand never left Daniel's arm, as if afraid he would fade if she let go. Daniel opened his eyes slowly. His side still ached, but the burning pain had softened under Soraya's alien medicine. He looked at her, her face tired yet strong. "You saved me," he whispered. Soraya shook her head, her voice soft but steady. "We save each other." The ruins were quiet now, broken weapons and raider bodies scattered in the grass. But Daniel knew it was not over. More raiders would come, they always came. Still, something had changed in him. He was no longer just a worker. no longer alone. He was something else now. Protector, father, family. They rested a few hours, enough for Daniel to regain his strength. Then he stood slowly, leaning on the wall, his eyes turned toward the horizon. "We can't stay here," he said. "We need somewhere safe." Soraya nodded. She carried Kiri in her arms while Daniel pushed the cart again. They left the ruins behind, moving through the forest. The road was hard. Branches scratched their clothes. The cart creaked. But they kept going. Hope pushed them forward, step by step. Days passed and the hills gave way to a valley. In the valley stood a small village, hidden between rivers and trees. The people there were poor but kind, strangers who looked at Daniel and Soraya with curiosity, not hatred. At first, whispers followed them, but Daniel spoke to the villagers. He told them about the raiders, about the danger, and about the woman and child who needed a home. One old woman stepped forward, her hands rough with years of labor. She touched Kiri's cheek and smiled. "A child is a child," she said, "no matter the skin." Her words softened the crowd. Soon, others came with food, blankets, and water. For the first time since the wreck, Soraya's eyes filled not with fear but with relief. Daniel built a small shelter at the edge of the village. His hands worked from dawn to night, cutting wood, shaping walls. Soraya helped, carrying what she could, sewing coverings, singing to Kiri while Daniel hammered nails. Slowly, the place became more than a shelter. It became a home. The villagers grew used to them. Children played near the house, sometimes running up to Kiri and making him laugh. Soraya began to walk through the market without people turning away. Her broken human words improved each day, and her soft smile began to return. One evening, Daniel sat outside the new home watching the sunset burn across the sky. Kiri stumbled on his small feet in the grass. His laugh echoed like music. Soraya stood nearby, her eyes shining as she watched her child play. Daniel's heart felt heavy but full. Kiri waddled toward Daniel, his tiny hands reaching out, his voice clear and soft. "Da!" The word hit Daniel like thunder. He froze, then his lips curved into a smile. He lifted the child into his arms, holding him close. Soraya's eyes filled with tears. She whispered, "Family." That night, the three of them sat together by the fire. Daniel shared bread. Soraya shared fruit. Kiri ate with small hands, crumbs falling on his lap. Laughter filled the house, warm and alive. Daniel looked at the flames and thought of the night he had first found them. Smoke rising from a burned ship. A woman trembling in fear. A baby crying in the dark. Now there was no fire of ruin, only fire of warmth. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "We're not broken anymore." But danger was never far. Raiders still roamed the land. Daniel knew one day they might come again, yet he no longer feared. He had faced death and chosen life, chosen family. He would stand again if needed, because now he had something worth more than his own survival. Soraya leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. Kiri asleep in her arms. Daniel wrapped his arm around them. His chest ached, but it was no longer empty. For the first time in years, he belonged. The village bells rang softly in the distance, calling people to gather. Daniel listened, feeling the rhythm of life around him. No longer alone, no longer forgotten. He had a family. The stars shone bright above the valley, lighting the world with quiet peace. Daniel whispered once more, his voice steady and sure, "You're safe now." And this time, it was true.